Good morning, everyone. This is this week's weather. This recorded around 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time on May 7th, 2023. Welcome to this week's weather. I am Michael O'Malley. We're going to be talking about this week's weather, basically going over everything that you need to know about the upcoming weather over the next upcoming week. For today's severe weather risk, we have a level 3 out of 5 enhanced risk for severe storms. This out across portions of Iowa into southeastern and eastern Nebraska, extreme northeastern Kansas, and into parts of northern Missouri and western Illinois, And then we have a slight risk for severe storms surrounding that, and also a slight risk down there south to near Ardmore, Oklahoma, into portions of Texas today. The overall tornado threat is going to be concentrated up towards the north today. We have that 5% area, including places like Cedar Rapids to the north of Kansas City, places like Des Moines, Iowa, Waterloo, Iowa, with a 2% risk surrounding that. This is where our greatest threat for severe storms is going to exist within this area today. Generally speaking, 30% chance for hail, meaning you have a 30% chance of seeing a hailstone 1 inch or greater within 25 miles of a given point. That's a pretty significant risk, and also the potential for some very significant winds today. Again, 30% areas centered around Des Moines, Waterloo, south to near Kirksville, and to the north of Kansas City. So basically, there is a chance for some pretty significant winds today, over 75 miles per hour or hurricane force in this area, part of a larger mesoscale convective complex. And then we have several other areas for severe storms. Again, this area down near Oklahoma City or to the south there. The potential for damaging winds, large hail, no tornado threat though down to the south, which is certainly some good news there. Looking here at the NAM 3 kilometer, this is just the reflectivity alone. We'll go ahead and stop it at the last frame and kind of rewind back. We notice kind of over the next several hours we've got this complex of storms run up to about the current time. We have this complex of storms that is moving off towards the south here. And we notice that over the next several hours as we progress throughout the remainder of today, this is about 2 o'clock Eastern time. Then we move it out here to just about 4 o'clock Eastern time. And we notice that we have scattered thunderstorms developing out here. And again, generally speaking, our greatest risk area is going to be out here in Iowa today. And we notice that there's going to be a complex of thunderstorms that end up developing out here. Generally speaking, this is going to be more of a linear mode today. Supercells are possible, at least initially. However, this looks to be a linear mode of storms that will continue into the early overnight hours as we continue with this kind of northwest flow aloft, meaning that we're going to be generally dealing with potentially derechos, or at least long-lived squall lines that can produce some pretty significant wind. And again, that's why we have the risk for severe storms all the way down into northern Alabama and northern Georgia, as another round of storms coming out of Indiana today could get some more instability down to the south and become marginally severe, capable of producing damaging winds and or some small hail. So again, generally speaking, out across the northern area today, mainly targeting a damaging wind, large hail potential, maybe a few isolated line-embedded tornadoes, maybe a discrete supercell forms in this environment before this all congeals into a linear mode, but generally speaking, damaging winds, large hail, primary threats up there. As far as tomorrow's severe weather threat goes, there is a level 2 out of 5 slight risk for severe storms. This generally from about Springfield, Missouri through about Evansville, Indiana, with a level 1 out of 5 marginal risk, really from about the Dallas-Fort Worth area through Indianapolis, Indiana, curving back, really kind of forming almost that little supercell structure there. But through about Oklahoma City, curving back to the north of Atlanta, this including Lexington, Kentucky, Paducah, Kentucky. Again, generally the risk for severe storms tomorrow, 2% tornado risk, not a high-end threat for tomorrow. I think, again, linear mode is going to be the most expected here, with the potential for some large hail and damaging straight-line winds. No real surprise there. And then we continue off towards the day 3 threat. There is a couple of areas for severe storms. Marginal risk out across the northern plains into places like Denver, Colorado. Marginal risk out across South Carolina, North Carolina, and portions of far southern Virginia. And a slight risk out across portions of the plains to the north of Oklahoma City. This, again, generally speaking, will be for damaging winds, large hail, places like Wichita, Kansas, back into the Texas-Oklahoma Panhandle. On day 5, we also have a slight risk for severe storms. This from about Amarillo, Texas through Garden City, Kansas, and back up through near Kearney, Nebraska. This generally will be dry line supercells, possibly with the potential for all modes of severe weather possible. So one of the things that we kind of like to do here is take a look at what to expect and what our main driving weather systems will be. Well, first of all, we notice that we have a broad upper level disturbance here, well to the west and southwest of Portland. And this will be diving in out across the western and northwestern U.S. over the next several days. And this will be partly responsible for creating a lot of lifting out across portions of the Central Plains. This will be our day 5 threat. So this is still several days away from entering the U.S. However, this will be our day 5 threat as this system kind of drifts over the eastern or over the western U.S. and creates a lot of lifting out across the Central Plains. And this will be responsible for that area of low pressure and potentially cyclogenesis here over the next several days. We also notice this jet-like system here down to the south in the tropical Pacific, and this stretches all the way down into near places like Houston. This is actually the subtropical jet here, and what this really is doing, this is coming all the way out from the tropical Pacific here and into the U.S. This is actually responsible for creating some of the severe weather out across the southern plains and out across Texas yesterday. Now, this subtropical jet here is largely a response due to the ongoing developing El Nino conditions out across most of the equatorial Pacific down here in the equatorial waters. And so this subtropical jet will continue to feed this area of severe storms over the next couple of weeks before this allows for more general favorable tropical weather conditions out across the entire tropical Pacific there. So again, generally speaking, right now, we're going to be watching several weather events dipping in across the U.S. We've got another big system out here across the Aleutian Islands, and this will eventually also be a contributing factor to weather in the next several weeks. Now, looking ahead here out to Tuesday afternoon, we notice that several rounds of storms are possible, especially out across the southeast U.S. and out across the mid-Atlantic and northeast as well. Multiple bands of rain and thunderstorms that will be moving in, much needed rain out across this area as well, that will be occurring over the next several days. Multiple rounds of severe storms as well possible. Here's a pretty good band of storms out here. This looks to be on the 9th, so this goes out till Tuesday. Again, potential severe weather out here across portions of southern and into central Texas. And then also, again, multiple chances for rain and isolated severe weather potential all the way up into portions of Nebraska and South Dakota over the next several days as these storm systems continue to kind of churn in. This is our system that we were talking about out across the mid-Atlantic, or that's out across the middle of the ocean right now in the Pacific. That will be rolling in over the next several days, bringing with it some heavier rain to portions of the Northwest. And then again, this is going to set up that response for that day 5 severe weather threat that we were just talking about out here. So again, a lot to watch over the next couple of days, but this only goes out to Tuesday. So what's next after Tuesday? So rolling this out till May 13th, we notice that we have several bands again of storms that will be coming in over the next several weeks here. And this then will be setting up for multiple chances of strong to severe storms out across the Central Plains for out the foreseeable future. This goes out again till about May 13th. Multiple bands of rain and thunderstorms possible. Again, this is actually pretty good news though, because this area has been in drought conditions for quite some time. So at least this will bring some drought-busting rainfall throughout about the next week or to 2 weeks, which is certainly some good news. But again, this sets up the multiple rounds and chances for some strong to severe storms out across this area before generally sliding off towards the east over the next several weeks. Taking a look here at the precipitable water forecast coming off of the GFS, this is basically just a measure of the moisture content in the atmosphere, and the warmer colors here represent higher moisture content. We'll go ahead and run this out here. It's about May 13th. We continue to notice that the significant moisture plume extends all the way out into portions of southern Canada here on this particular forecast. Maybe some cooler and drier conditions out across portions of the southeast U.S. before kind of warming back up once again. The GFS continues to indicate multiple rounds of potential severe storms out across portions of the central U.S. and potentially even the southeast U.S. towards the latter part of this forecast here. Eventually, maybe one more reinforcing shot of cooler air. You can kind of see the flow generally coming out of the north here. So maybe one last reinforcing cold front. But generally speaking, I think we're pretty much done with the cool air intrusions. Again, this particular model here does have a cool bias, especially towards the end of the forecast runs here. This goes out to about the 201 hours, so we're looking well out into the future at this point. But generally speaking, we could be dealing with another round of strong to severe storms out across the southeast U.S., potentially on May 15th. We'll have to kind of see how that all plays out. And again, multiple reinforcing shots of really just a lot of rain out across portions of the central U.S., drought-busting rain, much needed, and potentially occurring out across the southeast U.S. later in the forecast period. However, looking at the 8 to 14 day outlook from the CPC here, looking at the temperature anomalies, generally speaking, there's a fairly good chance that everybody generally east of Alabama into the northeast U.S. and southeast will have above average temperature conditions, and out across portions of Texas and out across portions of Michigan, temperature chances generally look to be below average. And then out across the western U.S. here, a lot of ridging out here. So generally speaking, temperatures are going to be fairly high above the long-term average. So that's going to be something to monitor. In terms of the precipitation forecast throughout the next about 8 to 14 days, a lot of rain out across the southeast U.S. This is a typical wintertime El Nino pattern with dry conditions out across the northern part of the U.S. and equal chances everybody here in gray. So generally speaking, pretty above average precipitation anomalies out across most of the southeast with below average temperatures generally expected as well. Typical El Nino pattern, and this will be setting up throughout the next couple of weeks here before we start to get into more of an established summertime pattern out across most of the U.S. So with that being said, I do hope you have a great rest of your afternoon and evening, and thank you to tuning into this week's edition of This Week's Weather. Have a great rest of your afternoon, evening. God bless everyone. Stay safe out there in this crazy world, and I'll talk to you guys again some more later.